Hi everyone and welcome to my channel and to something different, my first macaque in soft pastel. I hope that you enjoy this time-lapse version here, but on Patreon I will be releasing the full series in real time, and we're also going to watch some of it together in a live stream, which I'll tell you more about. For this piece, I'm working on pastel matte paper and I'm using a mixture of soft pastels, both unison soft pastels, and a few Terry Ludwigs thrown in as well. Now, I will mention that I had a big problem right at the beginning of this painting with the background. This dark Terry Ludwig colour actually scratched the surface of the paper when I added the first go over of the trees, and I was left with a strange residue on the surface of the paper. Maybe you've had this happen to you before as well, where a pastel or particular colour of pastel sometimes is a little bit scratchy, and I didn't notice as I was doing it, so I really did it right over the whole background. And it left me not sure whether I should work on at this painting or not, because I quickly found that the background did not want to blend very well. And for a bokeh or out of focus background, blending is the key. So for most of the beginning of this painting, I was pretty convinced that it was going in the bin eventually. And I'll give you a quick tip on how to not care too much about that. When I do my initial sketch of the macaque, I always do my sketch not directly on the pastel paper, but on another sheet of plain drawing paper. And then I cover the back of that with soft pastel, usually black. I rub it all in smooth, and I use that to transfer my sketch onto the pastel paper. So the plus side of doing that is I still have my sketch, and I can still use that sketch to transfer another outline onto a fresh bit of pastel paper. So I don't have to start from scratch with drawing it out all over again. So that's a little bonus. And I know that if I start over, I can do that. But at this stage, I had already worked for a good couple of hours on the background. And a big part of me just wanted to continue and persevere. Because sometimes when you're working on a background like this, one of these out of focus backgrounds, it really looks like rubbish until you've got something in focus in the painting. And I know this from previous experience. I've painted lots of these jazzy, colourful backgrounds before, and each time it tries to trick you into thinking that it's not working out and that you should start over or put it in the bin. And I know from previous experience that sometimes, after many hours of blending and working at it, sometimes all you need is to get something in focus in the painting. So I got to a certain point on the background where I could live with it, and I thought, well, let's get the little macaque face in and see if the detail does bring the background together. So it was a bit of a mental struggle getting to this point of the painting, because each day I came to it to work a little bit at it, I really wanted to throw it in the bin. So I'm not immune to this feeling, although it doesn't look like I struggle very often because my videos are maybe sped up, or you're seeing an edited video where I've cut out some of the thinking time where I'm sitting doing nothing. But I certainly have the same struggles as everyone else, and hopefully in this tutorial I'll be able to show you and guide you through how I worked through that and what I did to bring the background to a point where I could happily work on. So I mentioned at the start that I'm hoping to do some live streaming from this piece, and I'm going to meet up with my patrons and we're going to watch the face of the macaque together. So I won't be painting live, and that's going to leave me free to interact with and to chat with my patrons. If they've got questions, I'll be able to answer their questions. If not, I'm just going to narrate as I normally would in my longer tutorial series. And this will happen in the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in joining us for that, then please do head over to my Patreon channel. If it is too late for you to join in live, the full tutorial will come out as normal on Patreon. So you'll get to see the background, the entire monkey, the foreground, everything. And our live stream of the face will go out as a part of this series. So even if you missed the live stream, you'll be able to watch this afterwards and see everyone's questions, listen to my narration, and hear me hopefully answer some very interesting questions from my patrons. So I'll add links in the description if you'd like to come and join us on Patreon. If not for a wildlife tutorial, I have many different subject matters over there. If you're into painting pet portraits, people portraits, landscape, I try to cover a bit of everything over there because I enjoy painting a bit of everything. But I hadn't painted anything wildlife in a while, and this photo reference was one that I took at a local zoo stroke animal refuge. And I took many pictures of the monkeys. I painted one of the langur monkeys already, which is already in my tutorials library if you fancy having a go. And I'm starting to realise that I really love painting monkeys. Clearly they have such expressive faces. You can pack quite a lot of expression into a portrait of a monkey where it's not always possible with every species. And I think that in both of the monkey portraits that I've done, they've both got a very thoughtful expression and pose. And I think that's what really drew me to this photo reference. And of course, if you come and have a go at this tutorial, you'll get access to the high resolution photo reference to work along with. I'll also be releasing some other shots that I took of the macaques that day. So if you want to work on your own composition, but use my tutorial to guide you through that, then you will have a selection of other royalty-free images that you can make use of. But this project was just what I needed. I've been working a lot, experimenting with things that are outside of my comfort zone recently, and I decided really to treat myself with a bit of wildlife, something that I knew I was going to enjoy. Having said that, I didn't see the struggle with the background coming, but from there on, I really enjoyed this piece. All of the intricate little details in the fur. The fur on a monkey tends to have this slight quiver to it, almost like she's got hold of the crimping irons. So it takes a little bit of effort to create the fur and give it that sense of a slight waviness to the fur. And then, of course, there is the colourful palette that I was using. You can see that most of the colours in the background appear again on the macaque. That's usually the key with making different images work together. So you can see that in my reference image, the background is a lot more boring, and I decided to change that. And this is something I always show in my tutorials, how I went about thinking about the background and how it's going to connect with the main subject, hopefully creating colour harmony throughout the whole painting. And this is something I'm always talking about in my tutorials. And this painting especially, will be interesting to talk about that because it felt like a struggle right from the start to get this background to work. And I think one of the main reasons it did work, I think, in the end, is that many of the colours are repeated again and again throughout the background, throughout the macaque, and then again in the foreground areas too. So I think colour always has a big part to play in my work. And sometimes it's really the colour in the end that makes a painting either a success or not. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of the bokeh backgrounds? I really love them as they bring out the detail in your main subject, but they're not quite as sometimes a little bit boring when you create a very flat looking background. And I like that sometimes, but then I do enjoy quite a lively and, well, it's a jazzy background. We'll call it a jazzy background. And I love lots of colour, and this is a way to inject lots of colour into the painting. So I've got a few tutorials already showing bokeh or out of focus backgrounds. If that's something that interests you, do check out my full tutorials library at emmacolbertart.com. But backgrounds are something that I really struggled with in the beginning. And over the years, I've really grown to love working on backgrounds. Perhaps not this background, but I did have some difficulties which made it understandable that it didn't go to plan. So just a thing to be wary of, sometimes certain pastel colours may have a little bit of pigment in it that can scratch the surface of your paper. I continued to use the Terry Ludwig pastel throughout the rest of the painting, and it didn't scratch the paper any further. It was literally just because I put it on its side and pressed quite heavily on the paper at the start. Not something that usually causes me any trouble, but in this case it did. So it does happen occasionally where a certain colour might feel a little bit scratchy, and normally you've just got to be a bit careful with it. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this full tutorial series with my patrons over on Patreon, and I'm looking forward to meeting up with them too in our live stream. But if you enjoyed this here on YouTube, please do hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, happy pasteling.